waiting a minute like I've done before, I think I'll just ask you to discourses pages 97 and 98. Between the two extremes of a life harassed by wants and a life completely free from wants, it is possible to arrive at a mode of practical life in which there is harmony between the mind and the heart. When there is such harmony, the mind does not dictate the ends of life, but only helps to realize those ends that are given by the heart. It does not lay down any conditions to be fulfilled before an utterance of the heart is adopted for translation into practical life. In other words, the mind surrenders its role of judge, which it is accustomed to play in its intellectual queries concerning the nature of the universe, and accepts unquestioningly the dictates of the heart. I'm going to read that last sentence one more time. The mind surrenders its role of judge, which it is accustomed to play in its intellectual queries concerning the nature of the universe, and accepts unquestioningly the dictates of the heart. So if anyone has any thoughts you'd like to share on that, please feel welcome.
Anne?
Yeah.
I'm just so impressed with the tools we're given, like Byron Katie, NBC, and to live Baba's words. You know that. So my friend Tim Cullen says, of course, he's a follower of NBC, but he says, Baba tells us to love each other. NBC, and I would say Byron Katie, tells us how. So I'm just impressed with how these techniques are really in line with what Baba opened the door for in statements like that you just read.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I just feel like they offer a way to, because Baba's the highest of the high, it's really hard to live his words. I mean, I know before I found the work, I used to backbite, even though I tried really hard not to. And then the work made me realize even more how I was actually doing that to myself, that we are all one, and that whenever I speak ill of another, it's like there's something in me that I'm just not realizing. And so, yeah, whatever works is great. And I also loved Eckhart Tolle. I felt like he described the experience, the what of enlightenment, of a more enlightened state. And then again, Katie kind of showed the how to, the baby steps we can take. Anybody else? I just think it's so amazing that Baba talked about the mind surrendering its role of judge, because that's what the work is all about, is to just notice that that's what the mind does. It's its nature to judge. And that's okay. But we can surrender that by becoming really detached from our thinking and notice that we are not our thoughts, but we are being thought. And so that makes it makes all the difference, because we don't have to be attached to those thoughts. They're just passing through, and we can attach to them or not. And the happy thoughts are fun to attach to, but we know in this physical plane, we're going to get the full spectrum. If we get the happy thoughts, we have to get the unhappy thoughts. And so just to be able to notice that the mind is the judge, and that it can accept unquestioningly the dictates of the heart, which is in Baba's words. I just love that. And Katie says, the questioned mind drops into its sweet home in the heart. And I do feel the truth of that. When there's a stressful thought and we sit with it and we just question it, it sort of just resolves itself out, and then we're just able to be in our heart more. So the goal of the work is to listen to that voice of the heart, the voice of intuition, the voice of Baba within us. So, last week we worked on seeking love, approval, and appreciation, which is a really huge subject. And this week we're going to segue from there into working on responding with an honest no, learning how to say no, even when it's hard, but when it's right for us to do that. And it's one of the ways that we seek love, approval, and appreciation is by saying yes to things that actually aren't right for us. So that's the work we're going to do today. And I have Katie's book, I Need Your Love, Is That True? And I'm going to read some excerpts from it before we go into inquiry and before Diantha puts up our PDF, on the screen. So I will just begin now. And if anybody has this book, okay, well, it's I Need Your Love, Is That True? And I highly recommend it. It's, these books are just little gold mines, and I've read them over and over again. What?
Who wrote that?
Byron Katie. I Need Your Love, Is That True? And then the subtitle is How to Stop Seeking Love, Approval, and Appreciation and Start Finding Them Instead. Okay, so last week we talked about, seeking love and not finding it, especially with our families and friends, and of course, again, I always like to give the caveat that we have Baba, so we're most fortunate. But so Katie says, so love seems to have disappeared. There's times when it just seems to have disappeared. Where did it go? You can find out by questioning the thought, if you love me, you'll do what I want. This is a thought most people have believed for as long as they can remember. The child expects his playmate to want to play the games he wants to play. If not, there's a big fight and they both stomp off to find an adult to complain to. He's not my friend anymore. The belief that a friend is someone who will do what you want is already fully active in this child. He learned it from his parents, who told him they loved him and rewarded him with praise when he obeyed them, and punished him when he didn't. His parents never questioned the thought that obedience is an expression of love, so why would he? Unquestioned thoughts about needs and wants launched the quest for love and approval to begin with. It's no surprise that after we win someone over, those same thoughts arise again. We haven't known how to question what we want from love. We haven't known how to question what we believe. We don't know that we can simply love and that we can simply ask for what we want with no strings attached. And then she goes on to say that this book could have been called The Two Major Universal Whoppers About Love. And she says, we looked at one of the whoppers in the chapter about approval seeking. I need to win people over to make them like me. And that's what we worked on last week. Also known as, I can manipulate your love and approval. Now we've come to the other one. If you love me, you'll do what I want. Now, if you really think deeply on this for a minute, I think you'll be able to find where that has happened in your life. I certainly can. It seems reasonable, so reasonable, that we've built an entire civilization on it. How can it be wrong? Let's stop and question it. Remember last week I was talking about, I found the belief after some searching that my husband didn't love me enough because he wouldn't move to Myrtle Beach. So there I was, doing just what she described, if you love me, you'll do what I want. So And fortunately, my husband knows how to say no, and it's a wonderful way to live. So, knowing the difference between loving someone and wanting him to do what you want doesn't mean that you can't ask for what you want. You can, knowing that his answer has nothing to do with his love for you. You'll discover that asking is much easier when it's free of hidden agendas. And when she realizes that whatever he answers is fine with you, an amazing intimacy can open for you both. Honest communication begins with you communicating with yourself. So this is the basic premise of the work today. We have to communicate with ourselves. That's where honest communication begins. And I can truly say that I haven't always known what I wanted. So it's really important to just spend some time in doing an inventory. And if you have a pencil and paper handy during this session, I'll be asking some questions, and you might want to just jot a few things down that you can just work with on your own. So honest communication begins with you communicating with yourself. It means responding with what is true for you, regardless of how someone may react to your answer. First, you have to discover what is really true for you. A dishonest yes is a no to yourself. So try this exercise. Imagine simply saying no when you feel torn by a request. Can everybody find an example when they feel torn by a request? And just imagine simply saying no. Look at what you think would happen. Write down the fearful thoughts that arise and question them, especially the ones that sound like, if I say no, she won't love me. Or if I say no, he'll think I don't love her. So, could everybody find that? Okay. Okay. So here's an example. If your best friend asks if he can leave his dog in your tiny apartment while he goes to Hawaii for 3 weeks, find your own divided moment and inquire. Realize that a no to them may mean a yes to you, and notice that it's possible to love without condition, even when your answer is no. People ask for many things. Once you discover that your honest answer is no, communicating it is simple when you communicate your love at the same time. The no is one part of your answer, and the acknowledgement of your love is the other part. So Diantha, could you put the up on the screen now? And I'm telling you, this is really difficult work, and I hope that you can appreciate that, and that this is just a beginning. We're making a beginning here with learning to respond with an honest no. So here are some examples of how to express your honest no to these requests and still let people know that you hear them and respect that they're asking for what they want. So I'm going to read this out to you now. Honest communication means responding with a yes or no that you believe in your heart to be true in the moment, regardless of any story that it may hurt or disappoint another. It's possible to live unconditional love even when your answer is no. This exercise is about realizing that an honest no to another person is a yes to you and ultimately a yes to them. And that's a really important point, because when you're true to yourself, it's actually the best gift you can give to another person, even though it seems really difficult in the beginning. And I've been working with this for some years now, and I've come to see that it's true. And I've also noticed that some people have disappeared from my life, and that's okay. People ask for many things. The following are examples of how to practice your honest no to these requests and still hear and respect that they are asking for what they want. Also notice that using the word and joins, while using the word but separates. Discover the words that are the most caring, natural, and honest for you, and link it to the no with the word and. Play with these and see how it feels to stay within your own integrity. So these are examples only when it's true for you that you can play with. Thank you, or thank you for asking, and no. I understand, and no. I appreciate what I'm hearing, and no. You could be right, and no. I hear you, and no. Do you have another suggestion? I want to please you, and no. I am quite frightened to say no to you. Please support me. I don't know yet. Please ask me later. No, and I need your help and support on this. So before I go on, I'm going to just read a little bit more from this book. Does anybody have any questions, comments, observations? Are there any of those examples that you feel would work for you? I know it felt very foreign to me at first.
For me, it's, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so for me, it sounds, this all sounds really nice, but when I've been in those situations, it's been, what's really hard is if I get terrified because I'm being bullied,
Yeah.
and don't know how to survive saying no.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. And the dynamic that's going on there, which I've also lived through, is that we helped create the bully by always saying yes when it wasn't an honest yes for us. And so when we change, it's quite a shock for the other party. And so you're going to feel the repercussion, but it does get easier. And it's hard. But you know what helped me the most, Paula, is that when I realized that I wasn't doing them any favors. If we are all one, which we know we are, and we're giving an honest no, I've seen that it's right for them. And I've seen it with my children and, well, with everyone in my life. It's not personal. It's just that it's not a yes for me. Right. And then, you know, it's like, and do you have another suggestion? You know, when I started practicing this, yeah, I got some tirades, you know, like from, you know, people I won't. But, but, you know, it's their opportunity to finally get in line with what's real too. So it's just a choice, and sometimes we're going to fail, but I can assure you that it gets easier. I mean, I can tell you that for sure. And it's so easy for me to say no now, and I just don't notice anybody reacting anymore when I just say no, because I'm so clear that it's not right for me. Why would I do something that was wrong for me? I wouldn't want somebody else to do something that wasn't true for them. Mm-hmm. You know, so this is something that you can just take baby steps with and work with slowly. But it does help to practice, and it does help to write down, like, think of your scenario and what could you possibly say or do. And, you know, if somebody's, I mean, somebody might yell and scream at you, and you know, you can remove yourself from that situation and say, oh, you know, I'll talk to you later. I mean, there's, you know, our intuition can guide us in that. I think the biggest awareness in this particular theme that we're working on is really knowing deeply within us that if it's truly a no for us, it just can't be a yes for the other person. I just don't believe life works that way. So when we know that we're doing what's right in our hearts, it's going to be right for everyone.
Well, thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. Anybody else before I read a little more? Okay. If you're not a clear communicator, you may live your life unloved and misunderstood, not ever realizing that if you just said what you wanted, your whole world would change. Remember that the first step in clear communication is communicating with yourself. And this is one of the reasons that when we do inquiry, the turnarounds to ourself is so valuable, because again, we notice that when we're not living an authentic yes or no in our life, it separates us from ourselves, you know, and like we learned in the first week, it takes us out of our own business. So imagine that there's something you want and you're having trouble asking for it. You're hoping to get it from your partner or your friend. You're resenting him or her because you're not getting it, or trying to manipulate by dropping hints or looking victimized and trying to make them feel guilty, all the while feeling unloved. Now, I can tell you, when I first started doing the work and I was studying this, I was really chagrined to see how I did try to manipulate my husband. And it was subtle. But you know, it's one of the subterfuges of the ego. The ego always wants to manipulate, blame, defend, justify. And it's a habit that we built up because we're trying to get the love that we want. So now imagine just asking for what you want and write down the fearful thoughts about possible consequences. So if you take a moment now and just imagine asking for what you want, and then you can write down now or later the fearful thoughts about the possible consequences. And then Katie gives examples. I want to spend Thanksgiving vacation by myself this year and go on a yoga retreat. If I told my husband, he might ... Or I want my wife to be more affectionate with me. Now, question these thoughts. If I asked her, she would reject me. Is that true? Can I absolutely know that it's true? And how do I react when I believe that thought? Who would I be without the thought? And then the turnarounds. Notice that once you have separated love from want, simply asking becomes much easier. But you have to ask. People can't second guess our desires. They aren't psychic on cue. Practice just asking. You could ask 3 people for something today. Ask without being especially kind, manipulative, or careful. Ask simply and clearly without justifying your request. Notice the fear and also the relief that may surface as you do this. Who would you be if you just asked for what you want straight up, rather than resenting that you didn't get what you didn't ask for? So what's the worst that could happen? Anybody? What's the worst that can happen if you ask for what you want?
You'll be mocked.
Okay, yeah.
Like, that was a dumb idea.
Okay. You know, what comes up for me is they'll say no, but I haven't lost anything, because if I didn't ask, it would have been like a no anyway. When you, go ahead. Anybody?
Well, my son is always very challenging for me. And he once didn't speak to me for 2 years, and I never found out why. And he wouldn't talk about it. And anyway, I feel like he ignores me, and I've asked him to call me once a week or just an email, and he's like, no. So I feel like he doesn't love me.
Yeah. Well, I can just hear Katie's voice from listening to what you said, and she would say, call him.
Yeah, I do. But
Okay.
he often pick up.
Yeah. I mean, she gives that very example. You know, she says, I just want to hear my child's voice, so I'll just pick up the phone and call him. And of course, I don't know what will happen. but we do the best we can, you know. And I have to say, with children especially, you know, Baba says the cause of suffering is desire. And we have so many desires with our children for love and all of that. But honestly, I can tell you that I became much more detached, even with my children and my husband, from doing the work. And what I discovered is that I can love them unconditionally and be detached. And I've noticed over time, they're much more, they reach out to me more because I'm not asking them for anything and I'm not giving them advice. And so, you know, you can just experiment and you can ask your son for what you want and he can say no, and you haven't lost anything, really.
Yeah, I guess the fear is that he'll not speak to me for 2 years again.
Oh, I know. I believe me. Yeah.
I know.
And so, you know, another thing in the work, Katie says, the worst thing that happens to us becomes the best thing. And, you know, I can tell you from my own example, the worst thing that happened to me was that my daughter was diagnosed with depression. And that's how the work came to me. And then I just got out of her business and I worked on myself and I just noticed that she was doing fine. You know, in the work, you know, Katie always talks about everybody has equal wisdom. That inner wisdom is inside all of us. And I know myself as a parent, I used to feel like my children really needed my help and my advice and all of this and that. But when I started doing the work, I just trusted that their inner wisdom would guide them. And I would tell them that. And it's liberating. It's actually liberating. So just notice if you have the opportunity and it comes up, to just say, oh, you know, I know you'll find the answer. You know, I mean, my kids never used to ask me for advice and now they'll ask me and I'll just say, I trust that the answer's inside of you, you know. And I just think that's such a beautiful way to live, to really reinforce that we all have that inner wisdom, that voice of intuition. Okay, so I'm going to just read on a little farther. So when you ask for what you want, it's important to realize that others may not always be able or willing, or in some cases dishonest enough to accommodate your request. So Katie there is saying people might accommodate your request because they're afraid to say no. In that case, ask someone else or turn it around and ask you. Give yourself what it is that you think you want. If everyone says no, who's left? Obviously, you're the one you've been waiting for. Maybe you want someone to be more honest with you, talk to you, not talk to you so much, be your friend, leave you alone, not be so nice all the time. Can you give any of those things to yourself? Maybe you want a hug. What do you think a hug would give you? Feel that and give it to yourself. If that doesn't work, ask someone directly. And if they say no and you still want that hug, ask someone else until you get it. Who is stopping you but you? And actually, Katie has a funny story. When she first woke up to what she calls reality in 1986, and she hadn't really integrated the wisdom enough to be like a normal person, she would go around hugging people. You know, she lived in Barstow, California in the desert, and she would just walk around and hug people. I mean, you know, it's kind of cute, really. I had another thought. Now I just lost it. What is it?
Maybe the virus is a good thing because we have to learn to hug ourselves because there's no one else to hug.
And you know, oh, this is what I wanted to share on that very subject. We really have to love ourselves. And I think most of us have learned not to do that. We can do really a good job at loving others. And I just heard a somatic practitioner the other day saying that in Ayurvedic and in Chinese medicine, there's healers and people who work in the healing professions, they're really good at giving love, and it's the front of the heart, it's really open. But in these modalities, they say there's also the back of the heart that's by the spine. And when the back of the heart is open, that's where self-love occurs. And I hadn't heard it described that way, but I know I've said in a previous inquiry circle, one of the most important things I've learned in the work is that I had to love myself. And it's really about having compassion for my own imperfection and all of that. And I also found that that's actually, the wound is where the light comes through. It's like, that's how I'm able to have compassion. So notice that you can just love yourself completely and don't leave out the part that's wounded, because that's the part that really allows the compassion and the empathy to flow. And, you know, we're just all in this together. And hugging yourself is fun, actually. I mean, look, you know, I'm hugging myself. Ooh, that actually feels good. Okay. Okay, you may find that what you really want to ask for is love. If so, notice the impulse to trade something else for love. What would happen if you simply stopped the bartering and allowed yourself to feel love instead? For example, suppose you feel unloved by your partner who doesn't seem to be paying attention to you. Suddenly, you have an impulse to buy him a gift or do something generous for him. If you look more carefully, you may notice that you're trying to give the gift in exchange for some care and attention. Suppose you give yourself the care and attention instead. Naturally, this means questioning the thought that's causing you pain. In this case, the thought may be, he's not paying attention to me, and that means that he doesn't love me. Is that true? Can you absolutely know that it's true? How do you react when you believe that thought? Who would you be without it? And how would you turn the thought around? And after you finish the inquiry, see if you still want to buy him the gift. Maybe you do, and it's not in exchange for anything. One way to tell love from bartering is that when you give anyone a gift out of love, you give the pleasure to yourself. Okay, so before we go into our inquiry, does anybody have any thoughts, comments, questions, anything you would like to share?
It's like I want him to love me my way, not his way.
Well, good luck with that, right?
Yeah.
So, Paula, in that situation, you could get really curious about, well, what is his way of loving? If I'm not blocking or trying to manipulate how he's going to love me, maybe it would be just a really fun experiment to just see what happens. You might be surprised.
Well, I haven't been surprised his whole life. And he's 35, but he just doesn't, he's just very remote. He doesn't want much interaction with me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you can question that thought. He doesn't want much interaction with me. That would be a great one to take to inquiry and just remember, the work is actually opening our brain up to a bigger awareness. And so when you're believing that thought and you've got all the facts to prove that it's true, that's that interpreter in the left hemisphere that just keeps reinforcing that story. And when you sit down and question that thought, he doesn't want interaction with me, and you actually question it, just get really curious to see what's on the other side of that. You know, I don't want much interaction with me. Find those examples where that's true, and even find where you don't want much interaction with him, because maybe you just want it in a particular way. Like, you know, you were saying.
I don't really like him very much.
Well, you know, maybe he has a sense of that.
Maybe.
But We're all one. And if Baba teaches us, I mean, that's one of the most important things, you know, we are all one. And so if we don't like someone, it's really worth sitting in that and withdrawing that projection of dislike and finding, well, where don't I like myself? And just doing that work, because when we like ourselves, it's not even possible to dislike someone else. So that would be the work, would be to find where you don't like yourself. I mean, this is all about disidentifying from thoughts. No thought is true. I mean, he is wonderful is just a thought. He is not wonderful. It's all just thought. And the whole purpose of inquiry is to take us beyond thought so that we can live in that place where Baba lives, which is just pure love. So just notice the stressful thoughts and question them. That's what the work is about. Anyone else have anything they would like to add?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, is this okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, so for Tina too, I have a son that I dearly love, and he's very, very difficult and always has been for me. And I don't know if this will be helpful or not, and I keep forgetting it, and I don't know where the boundary is, but when we were in India and he was 11, and he's 45 now, but he was 11, Baba showed me, Baba said, I mean, really loud inside of me, he said, he's mine, and there's a boundary, and you don't cross it. And I just said, but Baba, I don't know where that boundary is. I really don't. And I'm like, you know, and I keep crossing it, you know, and it really, really irritates him and makes him mad and all that, you know. And
Yes.
And it's very difficult to communicate with him. And I just love him with my whole heart.
Yes.
But he's since before he was born, he's been a real challenge for me. And I'm sure I've been a challenge for him too. And one thing he said to me once was, he said, Mom, you know, the reason we are so conflicted is because we're so much alike. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. So my son is 31, and when I was doing the work, he decided he wanted to do a Judge Your Neighbor worksheet on me. So he wrote a really thorough worksheet judging me. And before he got like to the second statement, he just looked up at me with tears in his eyes and said, oh, this is all about me. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's no accident who our families are. Mm-hmm. We're all come into these families to get rubbed off, to get polished off, to be free. And I love the you know, what Baba said to you, because they're not our children. They do belong to him. And last week, I think I told you, I heard Baba speak to me in my heart about my daughter. He said, let her go. And I didn't know how to do that. And I literally let her go. I worked really hard at it through the work. And all of a sudden, she loves me. She couldn't get far enough away from me. She hated me. She used to tell me she hated me, you know. And now she's just, you know, she doesn't like to communicate very much, but she will just say, I love you. She'll just send a text message, I love you. I'm telling you, it really works. And so, but I think the dynamic, you know, like with our sons and daughters, is that we're so attached. And we have to become detached. And Baba tells us that. And it's hard. But I felt like the work showed me how I could be detached and still love unconditionally. We confuse attachment and love all the time. And if you get really clear boundaries and learn how to give an honest no, I can just almost guarantee you that your relationship will change, you know. And I am available to do work with anyone who wants to work with me. Just email me and we can have an individual session if that's something that feels right for you. this work is amazing. And once it gets internalized in you, it just becomes easier. Okay? But today we're working on boundaries. Learning how to give an honest no is a really big lesson for, you know, people who just have such loving intentions and want to serve everybody. And I really see now how it's like that front of the heart that's so expansive and magnanimous, and you never say no to anyone, and you just burn out. Because we have to get that other part of the heart, behind the heart, that's in front of the spine. We have to give it to ourselves too. And really, you know, I just read something the other day. Baba was saying, do you know why I always ask you about your health? Have you all heard this? The reason he always used to ask everybody, you know, about their health, he says, so that I can pummel you to death. You know, I need you to be healthy so I can pummel you. So let's be really healthy and get our boundaries so that Baba can pummel us, right? I just thought that was the cutest thing ever, you know? All right, so our inquiry today, and I want everybody to see if you can find your situation. He or she asks too much of me, okay? So I'll say they ask too much of me. And I'm gonna just give you a minute to find your situation, and you know how this works because we've been doing this for a while. They ask too much of me. Can everyone find it? Nobody asks too much of you, Tina? Not even Baba? I love working on Baba.
I feel kind of detached from Baba.
Oh, okay. So you have nobody to work on. Nobody asks too much of you. What about coronavirus? You could work on coronavirus, ask too much of me. It's making you stay indoors,
Yeah,
you can't.
I guess so.
I mean, everybody needs to be able to find something to work on. I mean, I've worked on life, the world, money,
Okay, I'll work with that.
coffee. Just raise your hand if you found something that you can work on. Someone or something asked too much of me. Okay. So remember how it works. It's just a yes or a no for the first two questions. So, is it true that they ask too much of you? Yes. So you can unmute during this session so that we can have our group inquiry. Everybody seems to be muted.
I would say asking us to stay inside is really hard.
Yeah, so it's a yes.
Mhm.
The coronavirus is asking too much of you. Or it could be the government, whatever works for you.
Yeah.
You just have to find what's true for you.
I got that my sister asked too much of me because I can't say no.
Oh, well, we're going to work on that. That's what this is all about. Okay. All right. Has everybody found their yes or their no?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So for those who said yes, including me, can you absolutely know that it's true that they ask too much of you?
And I'm thinking about I have two 14-year-old cats, and they're both my age and human in cat years, so they're sickly.
Yes.
And they're asking a lot of me lately, with both of them throwing up, and I still have rooms with carpet on the floor. They have to throw up on the carpet. So is Is that something that I could work on with this being non-human?
Absolutely. And I can totally relate because I just went through an 18-and-a-half-year-old dying and then a 15-year-old. So yes, I know the drill. Yeah, absolutely. They ask too much of you. Can you absolutely know that that's true? So it's a yes or a no.
I've got a 16-year-old. I had to just get up and clean up what he just left for me.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's a challenge, you know, and I have to say, since my 15-year-old cat died a year ago, I just haven't been ready to get one. I really want one, but I'm not sure I want to go through it again.
Yeah.
Although I figured if they live 15 years, maybe I wouldn't even be on the planet anymore, you know. Somebody else could deal with it, right? Oh gosh. But I just weigh it. You just weigh it until you find the answer. And, you know, one of my friends with my 18-and-a-half-year-old cat who was, I mean, I won't go into the details. And she told me, you know, Goer would put down some of the pets when it became too challenging. And that really helped me make that decision with that one. But I was able to let the other one die naturally. But, you know, you'll just know what's true for you. You'll know when it's too much.
Go here said that? Go here did that?
That's what one of my Baba friends told me, that if one of the pets was really sickly or just too old and sickly, she would put them down. And my friend told me that because she knew how much I was suffering over my old cat and all the problems that he had.
And Erich said the same thing. Erich pointed it out. No, with a human life, you want to try to make it go. You don't want to cut it short. But with animals' lives, once they're suffering, and you judge how much suffering versus progress in their life and just, you know, way of life, comfort, you know, how, like a dog, in our dog situation, she couldn't get up anymore, her hind legs. And if she was home alone, she was really suffering and was ready to pull the plug. She was, but luckily I had heard that it was okay. Yeah. So.
Yeah, thank you, Cliff. Well, it really helped me to hear that because I don't know, it was still really hard for me. And you know, it's just not easy, is it, with our beloved pets? So we're going to move on to question 3. How do you react? What happens when you're believing the thought that they ask too much of you? And so, Diantha, you could put that PDF up of the sub-questions for question 3, and that helps. This is what we can internalize. Question 3, it takes a little time. How do I react? What emotions do I feel? What physical sensations? So when you find it, just speak it out. So how do I react when I'm believing the thought that they ask too much of me?
I feel resentful and I feel sorry for myself.
Yeah.
I get frustrated.
So Paula, let's just stop for a minute. See if you can, where do you feel the frustration in your body?
I don't know.
So everybody, whatever emotion you're feeling, go inside. This is what I have found to be really key in the work. And it's not something that Katie has spent so much time on, but I've seen it work over and over with clients. We're used to repressing and suppressing the negative feelings, but if we allow ourselves to feel them, they're actually able to resolve. There's an end to it. So just get very still and notice where you feel that frustration, in your case, Paula. And when you find it, just sit with it as the objective observer. You're witnessing it. You're not trying to change it. You're just witnessing it. You're honoring that that's what's happening right now, because something will shift within 60 to 90 seconds. So everyone, take your time, find that uncomfortable feeling or emotion when you're believing the thought, they ask too much of me, and just gently breathe with it. Mine is in my heart, and it feels like a slight shaking. And I'm just going to honor it, and I'm going to breathe with it. If anybody wants to share what they noticed by being with the uncomfortable feeling, please feel free to speak out.
Oh.
I feel it in my heart more, but like with my cats, because I can feel their pain. But I also believe that from that perspective, from that place in our hearts, is where we can offer the most healing. We can feel that if we can go as far as to make it a detached compassion.
Yeah,
And
but
from that,
but were you able to feel any easing up by just putting your attention on it, the pain in your
yes,
heart?
definitely.
Yes. So just remember that. Sometimes we just have to take a time out when we notice that there's pain in our heart or whatever we're feeling. We just need to take a time out and breathe with it. And sometimes that's all that's really required. And I think we are supporting the greater whole. We're just honoring that, I mean, look at what Baba did. I mean, we can't compare ourselves to him, but he would go into seclusion and just take on the pain of the world. And if we can do that a little bit, just consciously, in my experience, it does pass. And then I feel like I'm freer to be present and ready for whatever's going to happen next. So another sub-question would be, do any images arise when you're believing that thought, that they ask too much of you? Sometimes you'll have an image from your childhood. Just trust your inner wisdom you can just close your eyes and see if an image arises. Maybe the earliest memory you have when you had that thought that someone or something is just asking too much of you. And then if an image does arise, that can actually be a separate inquiry. If there's a trigger in it, if something or someone is asking too much of you. So how do you treat that person or that cat when you believe that thought? How do you treat them when you believe the thought that they ask too much of you? Just notice, even if it's only in your mind, how are you treating them? And just speak up if you have anything you would like to share. Because everybody who shares is helping, I believe, the group inquiry. Because there's nothing new under the sun, believe me. I've not heard anything that I haven't experienced.
Mine is not a person. It's coronavirus.
Yes. And so how do you treat coronavirus when you're believing the thought that it's asking too much of you? How do you treat it?
I don't know. I try to keep away from it.
Yeah, well, that's, you treat it, you distance yourself. I mean, what comes up for me is maybe treating it like an enemy. Would you say
Definitely.
that?
Yeah.
Yes. So you treat it like it's an enemy.
And it's a scary enemy.
A scary enemy, yes. Yes, absolutely.
Because they don't know how it spreads, and they're talking about
Yeah,
aerosolized droplets and
right. So you can just revolve all those scary thoughts. See, I don't even study it because I don't even need to go there with my mind. I just do the work on it if I need to. But what happens when we create an enemy? We're really giving it power, right? And remember the session we did on the coronavirus, and I gave a different perspective to consider, which really supported me, was that, you know, I heard these women talking about it meaning the crown, the feminine crown in Latin, and that they were speculating that this whole thing that's happening around the world is bringing up the feminine into her rightful place next to the masculine energy. And I surmised that the feminine is about home and nurturing and slowing down. And all of those things have happened to us, whether we want it or not. And I thought, what a kind way to bring the feminine into more balance, rather than going through major wars and drought and famines and plagues and earthquakes and, you know, volcanoes erupting. There's so many more violent ways. So it's just another perspective to consider.
Mhm.
Yeah. So how, anybody else on how you treat them when you're believing the thought that they ask too much of you? How do you treat them? It's just good to notice. I mean, I could say with my cats, when they were dying, they became a chore. Part of the time, it was just a heavy chore.
You know, this is a very good one for me because I won't go into too many details about it, but there's a lot of situations where people ask me to do things for them. And sometimes I have a certain lightness about it, but I definitely get into their business, and that's where the problems start. You know, like I start projecting, you know, judging them, thinking about all these things about them, and uh, instead of just kind of detaching from it, and you know, sometimes, you know, like this thing about an honest no is really great for me,
It's
and
great for all of us, believe
yeah,
me.
it's definitely not like something that I'm very good at, but I do say no. Um, so it's like a work in progress.
Yeah.
But I mean, this just happened just the other day. People try to take advantage of me, actually. But
Okay, so I would question that thought, write it down. You can do
okay.
this on your own, or you can call me up and we can do a session. People
Okay.
try to take advantage of me. Is that true? It's going to be a great inquiry for you.
Okay.
When you learn how to give an honest no,
Yeah.
because, you know, ultimately it's not even possible for people to try to take advantage of you.
Right.
We do this to ourselves over and over and over again. That's why Katie says victims are the most violent people, because we're so violent to ourselves when we're not honest with ourselves.
I just like to say one thing about this, that being a Baba lover, and are we all Baba lovers here today?
Yes.
Is everybody a Baba lover? So
And
anyway, whether you are or aren't, I'm just going to put this out there that that I do feel that Baba, you know, puts me in every situation I'm in, and there's a fair amount of Baba things So it's kind of like an interesting scenario. It's like I don't want to not be asked things, but at the same time, and I feel like Baba definitely pushes the envelope, as much as I can take, and he's, but at the same, being able to compartmentalize these things and understand them better, which is what the way I'm seeing Byron Katie's work and the work.
Yes.
It just puts everything in much better perspective. So it's not like I want to just say no to everything, but at the same time,
Of course.
I do open myself, and you were talking earlier about how we open ourselves up to this because of behavior. So
Absolutely.
after
We
a
train
few,
people.
yeah, after a few, right, after a few no's, I'm sure the whole thing will change quite a bit for me, or
Well,
whatever.
and I could send you that PDF on the honest no's,
Yeah,
because you can look at it. There's gentle ways. It can even be, I don't know right now, you can get back to me. If you
right.
just don't know, you can buy time. And
Yeah.
I really hear what you're saying, because I do think whether you're a Baba lover or not, anyone who is devoted to the spiritual path
Mm.
really wants to be available, and so it's always going to be a razor's edge, whether to say yes or no.
Mm.
And it will get more clear, because it sounds to me, and I can easily, my mind totally goes to, well, yeah, of course everybody wants you to play your drums and do all of this. I would, if I was living there. Yes,
It's not just
absolutely.
that, but it does have to do with
Yeah,
music, recording,
yeah,
and all
yeah.
sorts of stuff. Yeah.
And so the key, and you'll get to it when we do the turnarounds, is
Mm.
really finding out what is it that I want and need right now. It's always about making sure you're taking care of yourself well enough so that you will continue to have that energy to help people. Because just like with healthcare workers and people who do body work, the rate of burnout is exorbitantly high, because they
Mm.
give and give and give. And so in reality, it's actually not the wisest choice to never say no when it's not honest for us, because it is going to shorten our time that we're able to serve.
And I find for me, I don't know if I find for me, I can say no, but then I feel conflicted, and
So that, yeah.
there's too much energy around it.
Okay, so I think the inquiry is really going to support you, and really taking the time to address those inner conflicts. And I
Mm.
told you to write one down, and I
Okay.
didn't write it down, but anyway,
Okay.
I would be so happy to support you on this, because it's a very refined process where things become, your intuition will become really sharp,
Yeah.
and you'll just know. And it doesn't mean you won't get tired, or you won't second guess, oh, maybe I shouldn't have agreed to that. I mean, of course, that's just part of life. But I think that you really get so much more clarity about what's right for you. And then other things open up, where maybe there's a service that you're called to that you didn't even recognize, because you were so busy responding to other people's requests without an honest yes, that it kept you from doing something that was even more appropriate. Do you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Okay, so
But there
does
are a lot of people that have no trouble saying no.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. But I would say most of us who are caring and loving people tend to get caught in this trap of saying yes when it really isn't really right for us.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there's a lot of people in the world who are just out for themselves, right? But you're probably not going to find that in this inquiry circle.
Yeah. My son has no trouble saying no.
Okay, well, good. I mean, so that's good in a way because he's clear,
Yeah.
It's like when he says no, it's a no. So we were just contemplating how we treat that person when we're believing the thought, or that virus, or that cat. Now we're going to contemplate, how do you treat yourself when you're believing that thought, that they ask too much of you? And this is really an important one. How am I treating myself? And in my experience, most people have a hard time answering it when they first start doing inquiry. Like, we just leave ourselves out of the equation. So notice, how am I treating myself when I'm believing the thought that they ask too much of me? And if anybody finds something they'd like to share, please feel free.
Yeah, Baba kind of, he kind of did it to me. The older I got, I mean, ego and all that good and bad and all that kind of stuff came into it. But, I found myself saying yes when I realized I wasn't physically capable of helping. It's like,
Yes.
I'm older now, and that's a surprise, let me tell you.
Oh, I know all about that.
Yeah, it's like, oh goodness, I'm not 40 or anywhere near it. And
yes.
yeah, and so and then kind of having to backtrack and know, I mean, sometimes you just know inside yourself that you just don't have that capacity anymore.
Yes. Yes.
Which is weird.
Well, and we're all in this together. I mean, everybody's getting older, right? But yes, that's a very important thing to notice, that we have to adjust what we're able to do based upon our age. I mean, it's just natural that our energy isn't as fiery as it was when we were young. Does anybody else have anything they noticed about how they treat themselves?
I do, sort of like what Cliff was saying. I start to go into like second guessing myself, feeling bad about myself, beating myself up.
Thank you,
I feel,
Robin.
Baba wants us to do service and all that, and it feels really bad to refuse.
Yeah.
But I know in the long run that it just puts out negative energy and it takes me down, and it's not fair to the other person ultimately.
Well, and honestly, again, I will reiterate, I think the key is, if it's an honest no for you, that's the right thing for the other person. Giving somebody Katie says, giving someone an honest no is like giving them a kiss rather than a slap.
Yeah.
So sometimes no is just what people need to hear. And it can be a beautifully clothed no. Thank you for asking a no. And I also just want to say here, because I always had this tendency to give explanations and justifications for my no. Don't even bother to go there, because because it just weakens, it dilutes the whole thing. People actually know inwardly. We all know everything. And if you just say, a kindly, you could even say, you could be right and no, or I am quite frightened to say no to you. Please support me. I appreciate what I'm hearing and no. You don't, I just don't recommend giving too many justifications. It's just better to say no. Thank you for asking. And
right. Yeah.
Because that's where I bet, that's where all that self-doubt comes in. When you give all these explanations, because who's doing the explaining? It's the ego. But an honest no is just crisp and clear. And you have to understand that there's a trajectory here, because when we've not given an honest no, we've built a momentum of what people expect from us. And so just know that the more you practice giving an honest no, the easier it gets. It just gets easier. I can tell you that for sure. And then people, I think, become more thoughtful about what they ask of you.
Yeah.
And you can just notice if that feels true to you.
And also some people are just, that's their whole goal, is to, just to work everybody around them all the time. So, and
I think there's a personality disorder of opportunism, like people who are really opportunists.
Yeah.
yeah.
So you're
definitely.
enabling them. You create a
Yeah,
codependent
but there are
relationship.
some people who do that on a regular basis. They go around doing that. And what I found out was when you say no to them, instead of, feeling, what are they going to say? How are they going to feel? What are they going to, they just leave and go to the next person. It was like
Yeah.
shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? Their soul is just crying for an honest no. I truly know that what's right for you is right for the person you're communicating with. If we were all honest, I mean, honestly, this whole civilization is built upon this kind of crap. Pardon my French.
Yeah.
We just keep perpetuating this false reality by not being honest and true. And yeah, so there it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so did everybody was everybody able to find how they treat themselves when they're believing the thought that somebody or someone asks too much of you? Okay, so let's go on. I want you to notice then, what are you unable to do when you're believing the thought that they ask too much of you? What are you unable to do when you're believing that thought?
I'm not able to do like a nice thing for them, just from my heart. I'm like kind of twisted or in resentment.
Yeah.
And so like, even if I wanted to do the thing that they're asking too much of me to do,
Yes.
it's like I have a pushback on it.
So it's interesting that you said resentment, because I can really relate. You see how it just doesn't work to give a dishonest yes, because then you have to carry this resentment around. And that's just not a clean way to live. So let's go on to question 4. Who would you be without the thought that they ask too much of me? Who are you without that thought? And when you find an answer, just share it. Unmute yourself and just share it. Who would you be without that thought?
I don't know. It's interesting since I'm not using a person. I'm using coronavirus.
Uh-huh.
I think I would be less combative about the situation.
Yeah, because you wouldn't see the coronavirus as an enemy. You would just see it as something that's happening, and you notice that you need to wash your hands and not go outside. It's like you just take all the proactive measures. Question 4 is about finding proactive solutions, and you're keeping your heart open and free and probably not thinking about it so much.
Yeah, I'm concentrating on other things.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, and so many with all these beautiful offerings at the Circle Center and the Arties, and, there's so many beautiful things that have arisen out of this.
Right.
And
So
I noticed that I could be curious.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Curiosity about the other person would rise up in me. Yeah.
Yes. And it's such a beautiful thing. And that's very childlike quality. It's really allows us to be more in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And like when I first started doing the work, I realized that I had been wanting life to be no mystery. I just want everything to be clear and laid out. And then as I did the work, I realized how boring life would be if I knew how everything was unfolding. And so now it's more of embracing the mystery. And I can honestly say that life is way better than I could have ever imagined, you know? And if we're just open to it, you know, who knows what will come our way? And another thing I would say about, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jackie.
Oh, okay. Well, without the thought that they ask too much of me, I could work more creatively with them about solutions, alternatives.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Instead of making it just yes or no, be able to be empowered, saying why I don't feel good about this, or it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And let's look at other ways that this could be addressed.
Collaboration. Without the thought, there's more collaboration. Yeah. And I also noticed when I was thinking about my elderly cat, without the thought that he was asking too much of me, I was just noticing how much I love him. And I remember he would go lay on the floor of the shower for some reason, and he was just skin and bones. And I would just lay on the bathroom floor with him without the thought that he's asking too much of me. I would just hang out with him. And I will always cherish those memories of just being very, very still, you know, while he slowly withdrew from this world. Does anybody else have anything before we go to the turnarounds? Okay, in this situation that each of you has, find the authentic examples where I ask too much of me, okay? And if you want to share, and otherwise just find what very specific, authentic examples of where I ask too much of me. And when you find these examples, it really helps to write them down because they become your prescription for happiness. These are what Katie calls the living turnarounds. And then the work only works when you live it. So if you at least write down one, you've got your marching orders. Oh yes, my homework is to not ask too much of myself. Where am I doing that? When I'm saying yes to a particular person that just feels dishonest. One of the things I notice in this work is that the subject object changes. Like instead of me being the subject and everyone else the object, it's like, no, we're just all one. And what I would do for someone else, I would do for myself. You know, it becomes really impersonal in a way. I just have to take care of this body. I mean, Katie, you know, she talks about feeding and watering her body. It's like, it's this body that we have necessarily to go through evolution. And let's just give it what it needs and be really honest with it. Does anybody have an example that they'd like to share? Cliff?
So when you asked this question, within 3 seconds, I had numerous bells and lights going off, because that's much more true than anyone asking me too much today. And in my case, I'm a people pleaser, and I'm a freelance musician, and someone who works independently. And I mean, my whole life has been just like a dance that I do continually. So, and then knowing my own boundaries. So a lot of stuff that I've been working on in that area, where it's okay for me to not do something, and it's okay for me to try to do something that I want to do or whatever. So, so in terms of specific, I don't want to take all the time, but specific things, it's okay to just do whatever I feel like doing sometimes, and like take a walk, say no, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. I had an image while you were speaking of the boundaries, our personal boundaries being very fluid. There's times when we need to close in and just nurture ourselves. And then there's times when we can be expansive and you can just feel really generous. But when I'm asking too much of me, then I need to be generous with myself. There may be something that Baba has waiting for you to do that you just don't have time for if you're always giving a dishonest yes. I mean, but just remember that his voice becomes stronger and stronger within us the more we take time out to listen instead of assuming what we think Baba wants us to do. For example, you know, like you said earlier, we're in the Baba community, and so we're just supposed to serve and serve and serve. And I would really question that thought. You know, for me, and maybe that's one reason I'm not in a community, because I lived in a spiritual community for 20 years, an intentional community, and all I did was serve, serve, serve. So I really got my fill of that. And then I got to find out what made Anne happy, what makes my heart sing. And that's where the fulfillment comes from. And I think each of us has a unique gift to share, and we're meant to do that. And sometimes it just means saying no. So find those examples and really honor that inner voice, because the more we honor it, the stronger it becomes. So let's do the turnaround to the other now. So they ask too much of me. I ask too much of them. Now, this is often a difficult to find examples, especially when you're believing that they ask too much of you. But where might you be asking too much of them?
I see it as I'm asking too much of them. I'm asking them to know my boundaries instead of my being my boundaries.
Ooh, yes, yes.
How would I do coronavirus?
How would you do it with the coronavirus? You're asking too much of the coronavirus. Well, okay, let's sit in that. See if anybody can find an example of where I ask too much of coronavirus. I mean, what comes up for me personally, if I'm believing that it's asking too much of me, is I feel like I'm giving it way too much power. It's kind of an inanimate thing. And I'm just like with my thought forms, and I see this with the planet. There's so many of these huge, horrible thought forms that, you know, people are building up. It's asking too much of the coronavirus. Maybe it's not all those terrible things.
Yeah, I mean, now they're giving all these other symptoms that could be symptoms of coronavirus. Blood
and just
shows, whatever.
And just remember, Tina, the mind will continue on ad nauseum. It's like it can just go yap, yap, yap forever. It's like, you know, the bogus news. It's endless. And there's just a point where when you're really clear about what works for you, you just stop taking all that information in. If it's not serving you anymore. I just found that none of it was serving me. And so I am asking too much of them. What comes up for me with my cat was, I believe I was asking too much of them to think that they could do other than what they were doing. They were in the process of dying. And once I got really with the program, it was much easier for me to just enjoy his company. And I think I was asking too much of him. Even when I wanted him to eat or drink water, you know, he stopped eating and drinking. And I kept trying to feed him and give him water. And then I was asking too much of him. And I just thought, this is how people and animals die. They stop eating and drinking. It's the most natural thing in the world. Okay, let's do the turnaround to the opposite. They ask too much of me. They don't ask too much of me. Find an example where that could be true in your situation. And I can hear Katie in my head. She's going, nobody can do that. That's my job. Nobody can ask too much of me. When you are really clear, it's not even possible. You would just be able to say, thank you for asking, and no. They're just, so if you look at this in the vast terms where Baba says, Maya is the necessary medium for God realization. This is Maya just making sure you're really clear, just testing you one more time, right? They're not asking too much. They're just wanting to make sure you learned how to give an honest no. Does anybody else have an example?
Sorry, Anne, my daughter called, but I don't even know if you're on this one, but I wanted to add in here, I ask too much of me. I realize I asked myself not to dislike somebody. Like, you shouldn't dislike her in a way. That there's nothing wrong with a disliking. It's sort of what I do with it. Anyway.
Well, what comes up for me hearing that is I would question what it is, because they're just, you're projecting that. That's all we can do. The unconscious projects, and then get really clear about what it is you dislike. And then you're going to find that there's something in yourself that, as you withdraw the projection, this is what the work enables us to do. We integrate that into our own self, and we actually find there's something that we couldn't see in ourselves that we didn't like. Because when we're really clear, we don't dislike anything. Because who we are is love. And we don't even have to love. We just are love. And we certainly have the beautiful example of that with Baba. Yeah. So it's okay to dislike, but I would definitely question it. Yeah.
Good
So,
point.
and I'm
Thanks.
I'm noticing the time. Does anybody want to say anything before we have our closing quote?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we can talk after the quote. Diantha just stops recording for people who need to see it on video. But this quote is from Adi Kairani from Just to Love Him. And he says, every man suffers in his own way. If a Baba lover suffers, it is not such a great thing for him because he has a great backing and force all the time. Meher Baba is with him. Meher Baba indicated before he dropped his body, I am within you all the time, but you are not present. You are running after your own desires and I can't find you. And when I do not find you, I sleep. When I am asleep, it is in your hands to wake me up. I am asleep in your heart every moment of your life. Tempt me, remember me, love me, shout at me, call me, ask for my help, and the time will come when I will be awakened. Once I am awakened, I shall keep you awake forever. So again, I go to the point, which is, do not think that because Meher Baba is the highest of the high, that you cannot reach him or bring him to you. He says that he is with you all the time in your heart. So I have a little couplet that came to me that reminds me of this. So I'll just share it with you. When I remember to carry beloved God in my heart, like a cradle holds a precious child, then I know how to live this life. Jai Baba.
Hey, Baba. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming and sharing.